The Florida housing market has been on fire in recent years, but it can be really difficult to describe the entire market in Florida as just one thing because different locations are really different, particularly within this state. In fact, I always joke that when I do these sort of broad market analyses where I'm trying to understand how different markets are behaving, the markets at the top of the list are always in Florida, but also the markets at the bottom of the list are also in Florida. It doesn't even matter what type of lists I'm making, Florida seems to have some of the top performing markets and the lowest performing markets. So today we're going to do a deep dive into Florida's housing market and determine if there are still good places to invest in this state, what markets are performing best, which markets might be going to crash. We're going to get into it all. We'll talk about sales points, sales trends, inventory, cash flow potential, rent, anything else you need to know about investing in Florida. So the reason that we're digging into Florida of any state is because it has been one of the fastest growing states, both in terms of the housing market. Prices have been appreciating like crazy, which we'll talk about, but also just in terms of population growth. In 2022, Florida was the fastest growing state in the entire country with nearly 2% growth. You also hear tons of businesses are moving here. People are calling Miami, Wall Street South. There's a lot to like about some of the macroeconomic trends going on in Florida. So if you are an investor or a potential homeowner, understanding the Florida market and some of the nuances between different metro areas is something that you should really understand. So again, that's why we're doing that today. Before I get into the data, I just want to shout out that much of the data we're going to be looking at today comes courtesy of our friends over at Belong, who bring end-to-end home management services to your fingertips. With Belong, you can enjoy guaranteed rental payments, vetted residents who love your home the way you do, 24/7 support for you and your residents, innovative cash flow solutions, and an industry-leading mobile app. With all this, you get maximized rental value and it helps you create long-term wealth while earning passive income. So if you want to learn more about our friends at Belong, check out try.belonghome.com/BiggerPockets, and I will put the link to that in the description, but it's try.belonghome.com/BiggerPockets. All right, let's get into our data today. And first we're going to look at, what we care about most, obviously, is this sale price, but then we're going to get into some of the supplemental data that helps us understand where the markets are going. We'll talk about cash flow potential and rent as well. But first things first, median sale price. And what I did for all of these analysis is look at the 24 biggest metro areas in Florida because they have the most reliable data and allows me to do sort of these apples to apples comparison. When you look at price points in Florida, you can see that most of them are actually pretty close to the national average. As of this recording, national average right around $400,000 for the median sale price in the United States. And if you look across the different markets here in Florida, you can see that that holds consistent. One of the big standouts here is, of course, Key West, which median sales price is over $900,000. So it's more than double the national sales price, more than double that of the rest of Florida. And so you'll see a couple different times here, Key West definitely stands out. You also see Naples and Miami near 500 and 600%, 500 and 600,000, but a lot of them are under 400,000. If you're looking for low entry point markets, you can see a couple of them. Ocala, I don't know how to pronounce that. Ocala. I'm going to say Ocala. I'm probably wrong. Ocala, Tallahassee, Homosassa, and Gainesville all have pretty attractive price points below the national average and below the state average. As a whole, Florida's median sale price is about $383,000. So if you look at a place like Homosassa Springs, it's below $300,000. Gainesville's right at $300,000. Tallahassee's below $300,000. So all of those places are well below the average if you're looking for a place to get into the Florida market at a relatively low entry point. Of course, the median sale price only tells us so much. And if we want to understand a place as a prospect of investment, we want to understand the trends, right? We need to understand not just where things stand today, but where they are going into the future. And so we need to look at rates of change. That basically just means, how quickly are prices changing. And I've charted out two different rates of change for you. The first is year over year. That basically means I'm comparing data from March of 2023 to March of 2024. 2022. And I am filming this in May, but just so you know, housing market data lags like 6 weeks. So the most recent month I have really good data for is March of 2023, even though this is being recorded in May. I am looking at March 23 to March 22. That is the yellow line. If you look at the blue line, that is month over month. So that's comparing March 23 to February of 23. And so there are some really interesting things that you can learn from this chart. First and foremost, you can see that almost all of the markets in Florida are up year over year, and some of them are up significantly. If you look at West Palm Beach, Tallahassee, or Sebastian, Florida, they all have growth rates at 7, 8, even 9%, which of course is down from the pandemic craziness of 20% year over year growth. But given that this happened in the context of rising interest rates, that is still pretty impressive growth. Most markets here in Florida are still up year over year. Nationally, they're down about 3%. So Florida as a whole, at least in terms of these markets, are performing better than the national average here. Because the market is changing so rapidly, we also need to look at this month over month data. In normal times, honestly, I don't really look at month over month data because it fluctuates so much and it's so variable. I just look at year over year. But because things are changing so quickly, it can be helpful to see when there are differences between the year over year growth trends and the month over month growth trends. And this chart really shows this pretty well. What you can see here is that several markets are turning. So look at Gainesville, for example. You could see here that it is up almost 6% year over year, but just in the last month, it went down 4% just month over month. So even though it's up long term, things might be changing in Gainesville where prices are going to decline. Same thing with Tallahassee. It was up 7% year over year, but down 5% month over month. So some of this is certainly seasonality, but we are entering the spring where seasonality should be supporting month over month growth. So this is going to be something really important to watch in any market in Florida that you're looking to invest in. On the other hand, some markets are staying really strong. If you look at Crestview, Deltona, Sebastian, and Naples, they are both growing in year over year and month over month terms, which support stability and strength and probably future price growth in some of these markets. Now, looking at these trends are backward looking, right? We looked at what happened a year ago, what happened a month ago, but we can look at some data that obviously doesn't tell us exactly what's going to happen next year, but it's called a lead indicator, which basically gives us an idea of what is going to happen next year. And the one I'm going to use today, there's a couple of them, but the one I'm going to use today is called inventory, which is basically just how many homes are for sale at a given point in a given market. And this is helpful because it's a good measure of supply and demand. When inventory is going up, it means that there is more supply than there is demand, and that can put home prices down. When inventory is low or staying low, that means that it is still a buyer's market and there is either equal demand to supply or more demand than supply. And when you look at inventory in Florida, I think the really important thing to know here is that yes, all of them are going up year over year, almost all of them except Tallahassee. But this is in context of really low inventory during the pandemic. And so any market, yes, that is seeing 100 or 150% inventory changes, that would worry me. So the two markets that stand out here to me are Northport and Ocala as having really high inventory. To me, that suggests that price declines could be in the future in those two markets. You also see Punta Gorda is getting up there at well over 100%. Same with the Villages and Cape Coral. So those ones would worry me a lot. Not a lot, but some of them. If you look at the other ones that are averaging around 50%, that is very normal in a national context, even in markets that aren't declining, just because inventory was so low during the pandemic that a 50% increase, it is that most of these markets, even though they've gone up 50% in a year, are still way, way below where they were pre-pandemic. So when you look at Orlando or Palm Beach or Panama City or Jacksonville growing 30 or 40% inventory, that doesn't concern me at all, honestly. And when you see a market like Tallahassee, where inventory is going down, that suggests future price growth. So that's what's going on in the sales price. Hopefully that is helpful to all of you. But let's take a minute now and turn to rent. I plotted rent in a very similar way in terms of year over year and month over month. And what you can see is that rent growth in Florida has been really, really strong over the last year. You look at a place like the Villages where rent has gone up more than 20%. Tallahassee, it's gone up more than 15%. Key West, it's gone up more than 15%. And for context, rent in normal years goes up 3 or 4%. And yes, during 2021, some of 2022, during the pandemic, we saw these numbers, but most places have started to come down, but not these places in Florida. There was very, very strong rent growth. Even some of the places that look lower on this chart, like Fort Lauderdale and Gainesville, have 10% year-over-year growth, which is incredibly strong. Pensacola's up there as well. And even the ones that look small, 5-6%, that is a good year of rent growth during almost any time. Now, there are some outliers here that are not doing well. Panama City saw rent decline. Homosassa Springs saw rent decline. Punta Gorda saw rent decline. So those are obviously not things that you really want to see. You also see in Naples, there's been month-over-month decline. Same in Northport. So these are things that you're going to want to pay attention to. But overall, generally speaking, in Florida, rent is growing pretty well. Now, the last chart I want to show you when we're examining the Florida market is the rent to price ratio. I love this metric. It doesn't tell you exactly what's going to happen with cash flow because it doesn't really factor in expenses, but it is really helpful to just like when you're comparing markets, like we're looking at 24 different markets here. When you're trying to compare markets against each other, understanding which ones have the highest potential for cash flow, the higher the better in terms of rent to price ratio. So when you look at Florida, Punta Gorda, Florida is the highest rent to price ratio of any place in Florida that I looked at with almost 0.8. But there are other really good markets here that are doing pretty well. You see places like Homosassa Springs, which is pretty high. Naples is relatively high. The Villages are relatively high. That's good to see if you are a real estate investor. Now, if you're looking for an individual deal, you tend to want a deal with a rent to price ratio of 0.8, 0.9, 1%. And so all of those fall below this, but I don't expect the markets I invest in to average 1%. If the average is 0.6% or 0.7%, in my mind, I'm thinking I can find a deal that is 0.8 or 0.9% because this is just the average. And by rule, that means there are deals better than the average and worse than the average. And as an investor, you have to go find the ones better than average. So if you're looking at any of these markets, even in Miami, even in Ocala, even in Palm Bay, Port St. Lucie is pretty good. There are probably cash flowing deals in all of these markets and something that you should check out. Now, like if you look at Key West with a 0.35 rent to price ratio, probably not finding any cash flow deals. Panama City looks like it's not doing too great. So you have to look obviously in each of these markets to get a better sense of your expenses because this is just a proxy. But if you want to just pick the top cash flowing markets in Florida to get started, you might want to look at Punta Gorda. You might want to look at Naples, Fort Lauderdale. Those all have interesting data there. So that is the data I have from you. Hopefully this helps you understand what is going on in Florida. Generally speaking, prices are relatively affordable. On average, it is just below sales price for the entire country. Rent growth is really strong and cash flow looks possible in a lot of major areas in Florida. So if you are interested in investing in Florida, I recommend watch this video again, pick out some of the markets that I've mentioned, and then do a deep dive into it. Well, obviously, the high-level analysis comparing 24 different markets is not enough for you to make a decision about where you should be investing, but hopefully, the idea behind these videos is to help you point you in the right direction. So you can go say, okay, I'm interested in Gainesville or Tallahassee, and then doing further due diligence into that individual market. There is one last thing I did want to say about Florida that investors and homeowners should be aware of. But according to the University of South Florida, Florida homeowners are expected to see their insurance, their home insurance costs, increase by 40% in 2023, which is staggering. So if you are considering investing, make sure to get a good quote on insurance. Make sure to probably add some cushion there because it sounds like insurance is going up and might continue to go up. And that can obviously eat into your cash flow and increase your expenses. When we talk about the rent to price ratio, like it doesn't factor in insurance costs. So this is something you really need to add into your own underwriting when you're looking for deals in Florida. All right, that's it for me, guys. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Love to hear your opinion about what markets are good, what markets are not great investment opportunities in Florida. And if you've done any deals, let me know how they've gone in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Dave Meyer for BiggerPockets, and I'll see you next time.